Hello and welcome back to Changing Channels. I'm Ellis Leeward and I'm here to host your 12 p.m. panel where we'll be exploring what TV can learn from YouTube. Basically, we're going to solve all the woes of game coverage on television. So I couldn't ask for better guests. I couldn't- yeah, what? I mean, I've got the Outside Xbox crew with me. That is Jane Douglas and Mike Channel, and they promised they could do this. So pretty excited to have you here.
We promised, and we may under-deliver.
Yeah. Now we'll give it the old college try.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. That's all I can ask. I've put you on the spot. We'll try our hardest. So obviously what I'm going to do, I think, is start off by asking you to do a little bit of a brag. Can I have an introduction to Outside Xbox and how wildly successful it is?
Wow.
Oh, gosh. I don't like to talk about our many wild successes. No, we've been going since 2012. We've got over 2.5 million subscribers. We have a second sister channel called Outside Extra that's pushing 1 million subscribers on its own now. And yeah, we get to play video games, play D&D. Our audience is lovely. It's been really good.
All right, that was a good brag. It didn't sound too terrible.
Thanks.
It's like, just, a couple million subscribers. Don't worry about it.
It's fine.
I guess, as I said, you are kind of the ideal guests for this because you've really captured that, long-term content creation, audiences coming back time and time again, everything that television is looking for. So to start off with, what do you think feels different about how YouTube covers games as opposed to the kind of coverage we've seen on television?
I think it's safe to say that a lot of the appeal of YouTube, I think, for the audience is a kind of personality-based thing, so a feeling of intimacy and connection with the content creators. And I think some of that does come out of the fact that YouTube is quite a different sort of platform from television. And the content that sort of bubbled up was a lot more kind of homebrew. It was people in their bedrooms directly addressing the camera like this, which isn't necessarily what you would have gotten on television. So I do think that sort of intimacy with the presenters, a feeling of sort of friendship and a relationship with those presenters is different from the sort of distance that is kind of a general trend, but also kind of maybe necessary in television with those huge audiences they have over there. Obviously now we're getting to the point where YouTubers also have kind of huge followings and huge audiences, and they have become kind of celebrities in their own right.
Yeah, I think that DIY approach of YouTube definitely makes it more approachable to people. The kind of lower production values and the kind of immediacy of the content it feels more approachable, I think, and just something that you can sort of just switch on and feel like you're a part of, rather than a TV show, which is something that you watch. A YouTube channel is more something that you feel like you're a part of in a way, I think, if you're part of one of those online communities.
And you look at the trends in sort of gaming content now, the upsurge in kind of live streaming. One of the reasons I think live streaming has become so successful as a form of gaming content is it ramps that interactivity up to the next level, where people can actually live comment on content that's happening right now, and hopefully, what they're hoping for is a response from the streamer, and
or even to influence it as well. They could what do we do next? And the people in the chat can say, and then that'll actually directly influence what they're watching.
I think coupled with the personality-led, like the intimacy, the YouTuber kind of culture, the subject matter on YouTube is in a position to be really niche, where mainstream television, like time and time again, tends towards the generalist approach. I think YouTube, because of its scale, YouTube or Twitch, whatever your platform, I think the scales of those platforms allow you to make something that is ostensibly a niche but still reach a large audience. Whereas in the UK, in particular, as versus like the much larger American TV audience, you're making generalist content in the hopes of reaching as many people as possible. And then it sort of lands in that middle ground where it's not reaching the people who really want to see something about a specific game they're into, but it's not reaching the generalists, like my mum, who wants to learn something about video games, but something seems a little bit too tech for her, to be specific. Sorry, Mum.
Yeah, you can get so niche with stuff on YouTube. Like if you want to talk about a Sega Mega Drive game from 1996 that you played, no one's going to be interested on that in television. They're like, that's going to appeal to like 7 people. But you put it on YouTube and you'll find that actually there is a big audience for that stuff, and they're all looking for that stuff on YouTube.
I'm old enough to remember when sort of general video gaming content was kind of shuffled to that sort of 3 to 4 a.m. slot. You'd find stuff like Bits, which was a great show, and that would be on in the middle of the night, and you'd have to set your VHS recorder. That's how old I am, to record it. And so the idea of something even more niche than that on television is pretty unlikely.
Well, I mean, is it though? I think in terms of like streaming platforms, like you're more likely to see something very niche on Netflix than you are to see it on broadcast TV. So I think there may be ways back towards, not YouTube-like content, because I don't see that being on a, like you say, Andy, the kind of production value is not that. But there might be a new way, I think, in terms of that niche content appearing on a sort of more mainstream platform.
So if you were thinking to kind of bring something across, what do you think works, best on YouTube that you could see making that jump? Because obviously we've discussed the fact that it is quite restrictive. It kind of lends itself. We had a question just come in from Oriol Gonzalez. Hopefully I pronounced that close to right. Who said, isn't the TV format too restrictive compared to you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want? So what do you think could, make the jump despite those restrictions?
I think we've seen a lot of success, certainly with our kind of list features, which are sort of more of a although they cover kind of niche subjects and stuff, we go for a kind of very approachable title and something that's kind of clickable and interesting. I think the stuff that we do, which we consider our sort of premium content, and the stuff that certainly takes the most effort, and that we've always tried to make that look kind of close to something that you might see on TV. Obviously, our production values are not as good as a TV show with, a crew of 30 people or whatever. We've tried to write, scripted things that are sort of designed to be enjoyed by any kind of gaming audience and have jokes and things like that. And I think that's probably the stuff that we do that feels like the closest match to kind of television. But it's an interesting one because we've never had a sort of TV budget to work with. So I'm sure if we had that amount of money and crew to play with, we could come up with some really sort of fun stuff.
Is that a pitch, Mike?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? No, but
I think. Sorry, Mike. Go on.
All I was going to say was, we certainly when we set up the channel, we wanted to produce something that was a little bit beyond that sort of bedroom content, and I think we have done that, and the success of those list features, which are our most popular videos, is kind of testament to that.
I think also for our content, it is very much entertainment led. We're not making documentaries, and I think that is quite often the kind of content we see on mainstream broadcast TV is documentaries about about video games, which absolutely have their place, but I don't see that there's always something to balance that out in terms of like pure entertainment focused video game content on television, which is what we found success doing. So if it were up to me, I'd start with something entertainment led for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people when they're thinking about video game coverage, they just want to cover stuff that's in the news right now. It's like the latest games that are coming out, or like upcoming games previews, interviews with developers and stuff like that. And we've never really had massive success with things like that. The stuff that has been popular for us has been looking at the kind of weird, interesting, unusual aspects of gaming history that are actually fascinating and are maybe not covered in great detail elsewhere, because this has been an industry for 30, 40 years. There's tens of thousands of video games full of weird stuff that actually is really, really interesting if you take the time to research and find it and like present it to people.
Yeah,
people are going to find that interesting and watch it.
I think people do appreciate the research, the sort of lengths we go to in terms of research as well. Like between the three of us and now sort of five of us with Outside Extra, our sort of combined gaming knowledge is pretty extensive, and we, unlike cinema, we've been alive for most of the history of video games, which makes it a lot easier to catalogue. We're kind of contemporarily aware of stuff that happened in the past. So we're sort of in a really good place to kind of draw from that massive knowledge base and kind of pluck kind of interesting oddities and things that you can make jokes about. Basically, that's our sort of priority, is that we can write a funny gag about a particular game and things. So we're sort of very fortunate that we can draw on that experience to create the videos that we do.
Yeah, I actually thought it was really interesting, Andy, that you mentioned that you haven't found kind of news and current affairs type content really works for you, because that's one of the things I'm interested in. I used to host a gaming television show. One of the things I pushed really hard against whilst I was there was covering news, because for me, I found that, because TV lacks that immediacy of the internet, people, if they're interested in news, if there's something they're interested in, they'll go and find it. They're not going to wait till 6 p.m. to tune in and hear it on a gaming show. So I find that really interesting. And that's definitely, for me, one of the things I think will never work as gaming coverage on television. So, what else do you think can work on the internet but would never work on television?
That's a good question.
I suppose that the live streaming thing is an interesting one. I sort of, the closest I can think of in terms of the way live streaming works on YouTube is that sort of Saturday morning TV, where kids would kind of phone in and things like that. But even that is such a restricted level of interactivity compared to what live streams offer. I wonder, unless there was like a BBC or a Channel 4 or an ITV app that had a constantly scrolling chat feed that also your TV presenters were able to look at. I can't see like live streaming necessarily working without some sort of heavy modification. Plus, I think the thing with live streaming is what we've kind of learned is that actually, if people are sort of fans of the live streamer and they're interested in the game, maybe they're prepared to watch hours of this stuff, like stick around for potentially a 2-hour live stream. And I think the idea of blocking out sort of 2 hours on television for someone to very slowly play a game, and if it was us, fail quite a lot as well, is just completely anathema to what television is.
Yeah, that was an eye-opener, realising that you don't have to be good at a game to play it on the internet and have people watch you. You can also fail hilariously and people will watch that too. So, some of our most popular Let's Plays are the ones where it's all gone horribly wrong, which is nice because we're not pro gamers, certainly.
Oh no! Come on.
No, really.
So I'm going to kind of combine two questions that we got in. So we've had we had. Do you market research? Do you do market research to decide the type of content you create and which games to cover? And then we also had earlier on, we had Casey Wonder asked, what are the most important changes you've made? What have you learned in your journey of creating content? So I'm kind of interested in, I guess, in general, if I combine those into one, how do you create your content? How are you, deciding what's successful and what isn't, what needs to come back, what you need to get rid of, that kind of thing?
I think generally we will try and create content that we're interested in first and foremost, because I think it comes across in the content. If you're actually interested in what you're playing or you're enjoying yourself, that comes across. It makes it better content. But also, I think we generally have an ear to the ground in like our community and other like YouTube communities and websites and stuff, what people are interested in, because it's not always the stuff that you think would be the most popular. There might be a big AAA game that you're sure is everyone's going to be interested in, but then we'll make a video about it and it won't perform as well as us playing some random indie game that has got hilarious ragdoll physics in it. So I think it's a kind of... Yeah, sorry, Jane, Karen.
If I can build on that point, I think the item about market research in the question, Al, is that our market research is kind of happening constantly and like immediately under the place where our videos are watched. So we are so attuned, so plugged in to what we would call market research, so analytics, like statistics, overly plugged in, you might say, in that we can see how well a video, how well content is performing the instant we upload it. In the back end of YouTube, you can see how many people are watching your video by the minute. So you almost know whether something is a hit the moment you publish it. So there's such an immediacy to market research that I think us doing consumer surveys would be a step backwards almost, which gives us a wealth of data, which does guide us and makes decisions for us. But I think sometimes you have to not over optimize for what appears to be doing well. Otherwise, we'll be doing the same thing constantly.
And I think the key metric, the key analytic that we get is views, and as Jane says, that appears underneath the video, so you can see instantly whether within the first hour or two whether a video is taking off or not and is doing well. And it's funny, actually, one of the one of the sort of formats that has been kind of reworked the most of ours is the one that's closest to television. So we used to do a sort of magazine show called Show of the Week every Friday, and that was a lot of effort to put together, and it was a really nice piece of, it was a really nice video. There was a lot of community engagement with it and things like that. But in terms of the sort of views, it never reached beyond the kind of core fan base, and it was obviously a huge undertaking to produce it every week, and it was a very TV sort of oriented format. But actually, we worked out that we could modify it and sort of satisfy the audience in kind of different ways. And we've been working a lot on that this year on trying to find out what the replacement for that is that will sort of resonate with more people.
I think that's been a real long time learning, is that our first instinct way back when was to try and emulate a traditional TV format like the magazine show, having enjoyed like Games Master or something like that. We're like, what if we take a team of 4 people and make like a prestige flagship magazine style show at great like expense time wise, to make a 20-minute video or something. And that was a little bit of a fail. But yeah, that's like Mike says, it's been retooled over and over and over again. That's where the market research has let us optimize.
That specific example is a really good example of the different mindsets in television and YouTube, because you can take a 20-minute magazine show that has maybe 4 segments in it, and that'll do a certain number of views. Or you can take those 4 segments and put them up as 4 separate videos, and all 4 of those videos will do that amount of views. So it obviously makes a lot more sense to do it that way, to keep things like modular and as one specific thing, rather than a sort of wrapper around a number of different things.
And I think that's something that certainly the streaming services like Netflix are able to be kind of fast and loose with the amount of time an episode is. So you'll find a series of things, and some of the episodes are 40 minutes and some of them are 52 minutes and things like that. And that's never been a problem. We've never had to work to a schedule on YouTube. You can create a 12-minute video, or you can create a hour and 12-minute video, and you're not sort of dictated by having to finish on the hour, essentially.
So we had a really great question in from Finn Campbell, which I think is probably kind of for our TV audience, which is, if you're going to pitch an outside Xbox TV show, what would it be?
I think it would have to be something that we couldn't already do on YouTube. So I don't know what that is currently, but
Andy, it's the animated series of our Oxfordshire Dungeons and Dragons group. Hello.
There you go. All right. Done.
Yeah, quick, get a pitch in.
Yeah. There's my pitch. All right, carry on, please, Andy. Yeah. That's not video games, though. So
yeah, I mean, I think it would be a mistake to just try and do what we do already on YouTube, but for television, because as we've established, there's kind of 2 different formats, and also I think it would be a bad idea to do the magazine style show on television, because we've already established that the content works better not in that kind of format. So
I like screen wipe. Can we just do screen wipe?
Yeah, we could just do screen wipe. Yeah.
I think the one that gets tossed around all the time is what's the top gear of kind of games. Yeah, that's what people are after, basically, something with that kind of broad appeal. And I think I suppose what we don't have budget for is kind of comparisons between gaming and reality. I think they're always kind of, well, not always, but they can be quite interesting. And there are people who do that on YouTube, but they're the sort of people who publish one video every 6 months, and it's amazing.
Like when we played Hitman in real life with
that was incredible.
It was a promotional thing for the Hitman video game, but they had us controlling a human being in a house, and we were telling him where to go and where to strangle people. See, that's the kind of thing you can only do on television, really.
This is it. We never would have had the budget, but because it was...
I don't know if they would let you do that on television, Andy.
It's a possibility. But that sort of thing where...
I'm in control of a strangling man. They have no choice.
But that sort of thing that brings kind of gaming into reality and kind of blurs those lines is really interesting. But then I guess Nightmare already existed, didn't it? So that was...
and it's time to bring it back.
Yeah, it's time
with us.
Yes. Okay, that's the second pitch of the talk.
I know, I feel like we need to copyright all of these. These are all copyright outside Xbox. Nobody else.
Yeah. TM.
Our legal counsel.
Yeah, I'm getting my cut. It's fine. I'm all in. So I guess I'm also interested in something I kind of planned to ask you before this was, do you feel that you're kind of freed up by the fact that there's lots of different types of feedback on the internet, whereas in television there tends to just be, how many people tuned in? But then somebody just asked in the questions, Mark Chambers said, do you ever feel like the extensive analytics of YouTube constrains your creativity? Which I guess I hadn't thought about. Actually, perhaps having so many metrics, means you have to really define what you're doing.
I mean, it is a drawback sometimes. They have a feature now on YouTube where you can compare the numbers on the last 10 videos in real time. So you can put up a video and you can watch it up against your last 10 videos and sort of jostling for position with other ones, and it'll be like rising up, then oh no, it's dropping down again. And you kind of, at that point, you have to sort of be like, okay, I'm not gonna watch this for a few hours because I've been just refreshing this page now for 10 minutes. So yeah, it can get a bit much sometimes, I think.
I mean, we're sort of, again, quite fortunate in that our most successful videos are a format rather than a particular game. Like, I know a lot of gaming content creators kind of get railroaded into playing one game that their audience expects them to play. And so they're having to churn out the same thing over and over again. Whereas our most successful thing is the kind of this list feature format, which means we can cover different topics, and some of them will do slightly better than others, but broadly people are receptive to that as a format. And that means that we're able to keep ourselves sort of entertained and interested because we're always talking about different games or, from the entire sort of history of gaming.
I think the downfall of having that many analytics and also being on a constant grind for content every day is that it does recommend, in its way, a sort of risk-averse approach, because you could make something is going to be successful, or you could experiment with something you hope might be successful, but if it's not, then you've put a dent in your analytics for that week, and that's the grind of daily videos, that you want everything to succeed. So I think that is the slight pitfall of having like constant and like thorough analytics, for sure.
Yeah,
for us.
The benefit is agility, I suppose. In that YouTube, you can be responsive and react to something quickly. But as Jane says, you're also having to produce videos, daily essentially, and that can prevent you from taking a step back and kind of reevaluating. That's certainly something that we as a channel have tried to be better at, is taking some time at the start of each year and just stepping back and saying what do we want to do, what do we need to change, what could possibly work better, and experimenting a bit, because it's easy to just get stuck in a rut of feeling like you're on a treadmill and not being able to change up what you're doing.
Well, speaking of being risk averse, Jane, I know that you mentioned kind of before we started this panel that one of the issues with television is that it always kind of has to start from the beginning. It has to be like, there's a thing called video games. They're very popular, and then kind of go into what it wants to do. Whereas on, the internet, everybody understands the background of games, they understand why they're important. You don't need to do all that kind of preamble. So how do you think TV can kind of take more risks? What content do you think that I know you said that, it's difficult to straddle that generalist audience and that very specific audience, but what would you like to see that is kind of not introductory level games, but is going to kind of spark interest, spark conversation, in television?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not in no way a television expert, but I think television can afford to not straddle those two separate audiences, because I don't think they need to be straddled, as it were. I think the divide is not as great as that, and I don't think you need to explain to your audience that video games are a gigantic business and they make so many millions and millions, and everyone plays games these days. Your family plays games on Facebook. Like, everyone knows this stuff, and if they don't know this stuff, they're not the people who are going to come and watch your TV program. So I think like the level of assumed knowledge can go way, way, way up. I don't need to see another documentary that has to contextualize like the games industry. So that's as a starting point. And from there, content specific, I don't know. My instinct is entertainment led. I think people want to be, well, it's a generalization, but I think people do want to be entertained, and I think entertainment is difficult, but also I think if it is funny and rewarding and engaging to watch, then people will be attracted to it. And if there's some stuff that's a little bit niche, that's a little bit specific, I don't think that's as much of a deterrent as perhaps sometimes TV suspects. Do you know what I mean?
I think it'd be wild to see a TV show just be like, everyone knows what Skyrim is, so today in Skyrim we're going to do this. That would be so.
And if you don't know
jarring.
what Skyrim is, the context clues are there.
Yeah.
You know.
You like
It's a
look at
video
Skyrim and you go,
game.
"Oh, a guy's
Yeah.
got a sword. Okay, it's some kind of
Right.
Yeah.
You've seen Lord of the Rings. Come on.
Yeah, and then just to that level of assumed knowledge, that would honestly be like shocking to me to see that on television. But everyone's played Skyrim, literally everyone. So,
I say that with complete certainty and confidence.
I feel like
once you.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, once you've had a grandma play Skyrim channel, we can safely say everyone's played Skyrim.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that kind of interests me is I do think that quite a lot of sort of TV's focus on YouTube is about trying to bring over a YouTube audience to television and kind of picking people with an existing following, a huge following. So, for example, Ali A, who's a great guy and good at what he does, he was presenting a sort of car show for CBeebies, or not CBeebies, BBC. And that was kind of a really interesting thing because it's like, well, clearly the thinking there is that this is not content that is sort of gaming at all, but they've got Ali A fronting it because they're trying to bring some of his audience over. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the right approach. I think maybe a more interesting way to look at it is to just actually mine sort of YouTube for creativity rather than profile. So find the people who are doing really interesting stuff and get them on television. There's people like H Bomber Guy who's really like hilarious, and I could see him on a sort of comedy panel show, and maybe you might bring some other people over. But what you benefit more from is his creativity and his sort of mindset and things like that. And you could have him fronting a show that is his own version of Screen Wipe, for example, because Charlie Brooker seems quite busy these days making sort of Emmy Award-winning TV shows and things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's something I'm kind of really excited to see. Is just kind of mainstream television seeing YouTube as this huge home for talent that they can kind of draw from. Exactly like that, rather than saying, let's try and steal formats that perhaps won't work for that more traditional audience. Let's literally just steal talent. I'm very, very excited to see that.
Yeah, I think you see people on YouTube who will watch their favorite creators literally do anything. If they're
we lost Elle a little bit.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Oh, yeah, all good. Sorry, might be working.
I was just saying that people will watch their favorite creators do anything, so they will watch them do anything on TV, presumably, you would think.
Yeah, I would have thought so. It's just whether that audience is transferable, and I don't know whether that show that Ali was fronting was renewed for a second season, so maybe they didn't see that sort of transference that they were hoping for. But yeah, it's an interesting, wasn't it? Obviously, there's a place for having megastar creators on television, certainly, but I do think it'd be kind of interesting to use YouTube as a kind of as Elle said, a sort of talent pool that can be plumbed for really interesting presenters and ideas and writers, and people are already doing stuff on a shoestring budget that could just do with a bit of extra funding and a wider audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know, I did the BBC, something I'm really excited about actually is the BBC is really making a big change in how they cover games, how they try to cover games. So myself and some of the games journalists were part of a big event earlier this year where we spoke to kind of all the BBC staff, had a big event where we discussed, why they should change how they cover games, what we don't like, which was a lot of what we said here, the kind of, the fact that we have to come in and fight for our industry rather than just talk about it, that we don't get to, be a bit more specific or talk about exciting stories because we're always having to explain, just how wildly successful games are, that kind of thing. And I think one of the big takeaways I took from that is that TV is desperate to learn from YouTube. When we kind of opened up the Q&A at the end, it was just 1,000 BBC producers saying, how can we do what YouTube is doing? Because they just don't really have an understanding of it. They don't exist in that world. So, how would you, for people who haven't kind of grown up as part of this YouTube generation, what do you think they should be looking for? How can they understand, aside from views, what's successful, what is kind of good YouTube content if they themselves don't consume it?
I think one thing that needs to be separated out is virality. I mean, obviously you can have a viral video that will do astonishing numbers, like millions and millions and millions of views, but it's not replicable at all. And I think that's a sort of phenomenon that is kind of unique to online platforms, and just isn't going to work for television. With television, you need something that you can do every single week for a series or whatever. So I do think one thing to maybe avoid is to to look at a viral video that's gone completely ballistic and then try and work out how you can do that over and over again, because often like viral videos are lightning in a bottle and not something that you could possibly transfer to television.
I think it's important to look at like the way that the audience reacts to the content as well, to look at the kind of audience that that a piece of content attracts, and whether that audience sticks around and the way that they interact with that content as well. I think like building up a community around a piece of content is something that's really important to it having longevity. So I think if you were looking for something that you were to put on television, you were going to put out as a series with a number of episodes, you would want something that had attracted that kind of audience. I think, so rather than looking at the content itself, maybe looking at the people who watch it and how they watch it and how they interact with it as well would be a good way of figuring out if that's the kind of content that you want to put on your TV show.
I think, now is still a good time. I think certainly Netflix is betting big on video game related properties and, from a kind of original programming sense. So I think Netflix is already, coming from a sort of technological streaming background, is already comfortable with gaming and is understands that there are enormous sort of gaming audiences out there that will watch The Witcher. I don't think The Witcher was sort of successful off the back of the books. All credit to the author. It's the fact that the video games have been wildly successful and kind of established that universe as a sort of well-known piece of fiction. So I think other companies are already like betting quite big on gaming, and it's almost strange that kind of more traditional broadcast television hasn't got there already or isn't ahead of that curve.
Yeah, well, something that's, quite different that somebody's just mentioned is, as you said, kind of looking at feedback is really important online. It's something that TV doesn't have in quite the same way. But Adman said, how do you deal with the mental stress and fatigue that comes with the kind of, searching for content, the way content works online? Because it is quite a different space. And when you make, I know my experience making content for YouTube and television, I'm much more removed from it, within television. When you're making it online, it feels as if there's much more of kind of a personal toll. So how do you deal with having to, be so close to your content?
Are we dealing with it, guys?
I think
I'll let you know.
I think you definitely do become sort of a bit hardened to what you would consider to be personal comments about yourself. Like when I first started making videos on the internet, I would take every comment personally and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this person has said this about me. But now I see a comment like that and it just does not even register. I just like, get rid of that. And so it is definitely something that you have to get used to if you're going to have comments underneath your video, because that's unfortunately the way that the internet is.
But that's not inevitable. That's not just like a physical law of the universe. Like you cultivate your community, which is what we do. Like we don't just leave it to, for the weeds or whatever. I just want to like step in there and be like, it's not a law of the universe that you will always have a dreadful set of comments under a video. Like I think there is an amount of like cultivation and kind of and community stuff that
I think that it's
changes the nature of that.
It's an important thing to do, and it is a big part of the job is kind of weeding that out and getting rid of that stuff, so you can leave the comments as a sort of place that people consider to be a safe space that they can go and write things about the content that they've just watched. But yeah, that is a huge part of the job, is making sure that you keep that going,
I think the other thing you have to sort of harden yourself to is that the analytics are a double-edged sword. Obviously it's a great feeling when you put something out and it's immediately doing well, and you can see that in real time. But it's also then quite sad when you put a lot of effort into a video that doesn't necessarily do that well, and so you have to be able to sort of ride the rough with the smooth, essentially. I think that's I guess not something TV people necessarily have to deal with on an instantaneous basis.
Is it a much faster equivalent of Netflix like canning a show after the first season? Yeah. Whereas we all know that TV shows get better after the first season, so you need to stick with those things. Whereas we do that on like a week by week basis, not a year by year basis.
Something for me that kind of highlights just, how much more you're responsible for in online content creation than you are in TV. So when you make a TV show, I'm not going to design the Netflix thumbnail for it. I'm not going to do any of that kind of work around promoting it, getting it out there. The just general admin that goes around putting a show out. And so that is something you have to do. And it's, again, another question that we had come in. Oliver Snyder asked in particular kind of how much time and thought goes into creating thumbnails and video titles, which I'd flesh out into, how much more is there to it than just creating the content? Because I think that's something, people in TV forget, is you're doing everything outside of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're farm to table, absolutely every step of the way, through to promotion, et cetera, which, I guess is an interesting contrast. But as much work as it creates, and it creates a lot of work, it is somewhat of a benefit in that you can be kind of coherent from first concepting the script, writing the script, sourcing the assets for the video, editing the video, publishing the video, making the promotional thumbnail, and then putting it on social media. If you've got a hand in every part of that process, then there's a cohesiveness that is, beneficial, I think. But at the same time, it does create a lot of work, and it may not be scalable. You're not going to create a TV production process where one person is taking charge of every little job along the way.
Yeah, and in terms of the titles and stuff, we do spend a lot of time on that. We'll come up with 10, 15 different titles for every video, and then we will really drill into why one works and why one doesn't, and that's something that we do spend a lot of time on. But yeah, particular kudos to Jane for the thumbnails. She is a thumbnail genius. She designed the thumbnails, and she does all the thumbnails, so she deserves the kudos for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I would actually just quickly ask about thumbnails, because, I think it's one of the most underrated things for new creators. They don't realise just how important that is, that you could have spent 10 years making your grand epic and then you just put a Microsoft Paint thumbnail on it and nobody ever watches it. So, what goes into that? What have you learned over your years of kind of trying to create those eye-catching tiny images for people to click on your content?
Here's where the ruthless optimization comes in, because actually at one point YouTube did have A/B testing, and I believe it's something that's constantly in the works. But just from experience, we know that people like faces, and I don't think that'll be shocking to anyone who works in any sort of visual medium, that especially on a small scale, you're talking about thumbnails, humans like to look at faces. So a face, an expression is engaging, is attractive, not necessarily an attractive face, but you seek out faces and expressions, and I think that's very natural and intrinsic. So a lot of our thumbnails incorporate that, and obviously you're talking about a very small format, so it has to be legible. It's really not rocket science, I suppose.
Yeah, we used to have a lot more text on our thumbnails, but people are watching on phones, they're watching on tiny screens, and if you've got a thumbnail that's this big with text on it, people can't read that. As few words as possible, as big a face as possible, some color. Basically.
I feel like we've shared all we can share now.
All right, no more secrets.
The secret. No. I mean, there isn't anything more to share.
All right, that's it. That's the whole process.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, it doesn't seem like it now. Now it seems like there's some big.
Yeah, Jane, shush about the big secret.
Yeah, what's that? Oh, what's that? Jane's camera's turned off and Mike's So one of the other things, I guess, that comes with this is that, as you mentioned before, you really have to shape a community online. And I often think that might be one of the things television is missing, is that actually, as as I think that you, Andy, said, people will watch YouTubers do anything, and it's because they've built this following, because they build a community around their content. And so it's not quite so important what that content is. And I think that that's something television is missing. It could do more work on trying to build communities around specific series, that kind of thing. So what do you do to build your community? Because I think, it's safe to say that Outside Xbox has a really lovely community. You have, a kind of uniquely lovely community, in fact, for the gaming industry. So, how have you done that?
Well, first of all, I think the trick is that for our content, our community lives where the content does. And I suppose that's the challenge for TV, is that the community doesn't live in the same place as the actual content. In terms of what we actually do, I mean, Andy does a lot of moderation, and it is work. It's time consuming, and it's a little bit invisible as compared to creating content. But I think it's really, really vital work. Andy, what do you do?
You have to. It's sort of like cultivating a garden in a way. You have to look at the comments that are there, and you have to think about the way that they would make people feel. coming to your video. So people having like productive conversations about the content, or just chatting to each other, that's the kind of stuff that you want. It's people who are being deliberately disruptive or trying to be abusive, and that's the stuff that you need to get rid of. But there's a balance. You don't want to just delete anything negative, because if people are being respectful to each other and voicing dissenting opinion, then that's fine as well. I don't know. It's more of a kind of a feel thing at this point. Like, the kind of conversations that are going to turn bad in about 3 messages. So you can maybe step in and maybe do something about that. But generally, like, the more nice people that you attract to your content, they will interact with each other and create more kind of nice content underneath your videos. So at one point, it'll just sort of start snowballing, and you'll have a sort of self-propagating community of just nice people, I think has happened for us.
Yeah, I think it's not just to do with the moderation as well, and what happens below the fold, as it were. I think what you put out in terms of the videos themselves and the kind of positivity, so it would be easy for us to get some sort of short-term wins by, covering controversies in gaming and things like that are, I guess newsworthy, but also divisive. But actually, that's never been of interest to us, because, we don't want just a load of people arguing the whole time. So again, going back to our focus is kind of entertainment-led stuff, and just being, positive and entertaining. I think does bring in more positivity in the comments as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to throw one last question out. We've just got a couple of minutes. So I guess, essentially what this comes down to is make good content, as simple as that is. So what's kind of your one tip to any aspiring content creator, whether it is in television or YouTube? Just give me a sentence that, will make them a YouTube millionaire, please.
Well, we get asked this question a lot, and one of the things we always say is consistency. Like, being consistent in your upload schedule and the quality of your content, I think, is really important, because if people see a video from you that they like, and then they check back in a week's time and there's been nothing else, and there's no schedule telling them when to expect another video, they're probably not going to come back. But if there's maybe a schedule saying, hey, new video every Thursday, then you're like, oh, I'll check back in on Thursday and see if there's a new video. And that's how you build an audience, with that kind of reliable consistency, I think.
Yeah, I think making stuff that you're personally passionate about, which is something that Andy mentioned earlier on, is a key thing. If you're invested and involved, and I think this could apply to television as well. If you're passionate about it and love it, there are people out there who will be similarly passionate. It might take some time to find them. It might take that consistency to find that audience. But if you love it and you think it's important and exciting, then there's going to be other people out there who share your passion.
Well, the ideal is that your enthusiasm is infectious, and even if the people aren't enthusiastic about the thing you are, maybe they'll seek it out and become enthusiastic about it because of your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that point, actually, because I think that passion for your subject matter, no matter how specific, really comes across as a kind of frankness and is very engaging. And it's that makes the niche content way more accessible than I think television, for instance, might expect.
You think about those amazing long read articles that you get on various sort of publications, where it's a subject that you would have had no interest in whatsoever, but someone you trust tweets and says, this article was amazing. And it's because someone passionate and knowledgeable has talked about it, and you find yourself learning about all sorts of random things that you never would have considered. And I think we can treat areas of gaming and also gaming itself in that same way.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. If you watch today and you do become a YouTube millionaire because of those tips, do remember you owe both myself and Outside Xbox. Just putting that out there. But thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. I hope everybody watching did. So please do stay tuned to Changing Channels. There's loads more brilliant content coming up today. But from us, that's it. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elle. Thanks, everyone.